Hi, I'm Yolanda, and this is Speak On. Be a man. Man up. Boys don't cry. Why are you being such a pussy? Why are you acting like a girl? These are the kind of phrases that spring to mind when I hear the term toxic masculinity. But it's not a term I say around men often unless I know they understand it, because it gets such a negative reaction. Then the whole toxic femininity thing is brought in and it just descends into Facebook fighting chaos. But like the term or not, we know that society's narrow expectations and restraints on masculinity can be damaging not only to men, but to wider society. I really wanted to discuss the topic further, and today I'm joined by writer, director, actor, comedian, the host of Guilt and Shame and Reviews by My Mother, which I love. Just listen to Tenet. I think all the same things that she does. Gabriel Bisset-Smith. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with me. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing as well as I think anyone can be in the current climate. Although all those insults, all those things you read out about men literally took me back to my schoolhood.
Oh, I'm so
days.
sorry. Did I just trigger you?
I was just triggered by everyone. But no, that's good. That's what we're here to talk about.
Well, we might as well dive in then. So what is toxic masculinity? What do you think it is?
So what I perceived it to be when it first came onto the scene, and what I think it originally is about the basically what you said, what was put on men and started with young men or men in general as a thing of the way you're supposed to be, which is you're supposed to be hard, you're supposed to be tough, you're supposed to fight. You're not supposed to cry, and you're supposed to keep your emotions to yourself. If anything, sort of maybe a John Wayne, Clint Eastwood way of thinking of real men don't show emotions and they're tough, I think. It's sort of, yeah, and then I know that it's as we've talked about before, what surprised me with toxic masculinity, also with white privilege, is how these things seemed like quite reasonable things to be talking about that have now become, I think people feel attacked when you bring them up. And one of the main things I think with toxic masculinity is that people might have assumed it meant that men are toxic, which is not what it's talking about.
Yeah.
It's about actually the toxic things that men have put on them. And the same with maybe even with Black Lives Matter, how you see some people like, well, all lives matter, and you're like, you're not listening to what is being said.
Yeah.
You're just sort of having you're seeing those two. So it's kind of weird how those phrases have become triggers for some people to think that they're being attacked when usually it's the opposite.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because whenever I've said it, and I really don't say it often because I know that people don't entirely understand what it is. But if I've ever said it, then people get so annoyed. And it's like, what do you say? You just hate men. You're one of those feminists. You just hate men. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And once I just kind of put it in the context of, let's say, for example, men are told not to cry, and it's actually really bad for you to hold your feelings in, and it's just this silly belief, then they kind of calm down again, because everything feels like an attack, like you said, with white privilege. Actually, one of my friends, Ash, actually calls it, when he just can't bother to have that argument with people, he actually says it's non-white disadvantages. That's what he said. Yeah, that's it. It's just non-white disadvantages. And he was like, that if I put it, and he says when he puts it like that, people just kind of tend to argue with him less because they don't focus on the word privilege. And I think because I wonder if men are feeling attacked by it because they can't separate the word masculinity and man.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think about, when you first said we'd be talking about this, I think about a lot how, I've been privileged in my upbringing to, one, come from a mixed race family, and two, my mother, she sort of says she raised me gender neutral from a very early age. And I think kind of, I hate to say it this way, but kind of wanted me to be gay because she was like such a liberal artsy mother. She was sort of, and she's got it into her head that gay sons look after their mums more for some reason. So she'd kind of really pushed a gender neutral and was very open with me going, being whatever I want to do, especially sexuality wise. But then I do think I see friends of mine and people who've grown up in the same generation me, who grew up with Page 3 and grew up with Lads Mags and grew up with all these things that a lot of it is a challenge to your programming, and it's a challenge to the way you've been raised. So sometimes these terms, the reason people fight back so much is they challenge things that are really hard to quantify and that you might not be able to fix fully. And something like masculinity is something that I talk to about my friends. Like, if we were younger now and the conversations about sexuality and gender were happening, I think we would be more at ease with, I don't know if we would have been more comfortable about talking things, but there was very much when I was growing up, pretty much when I was, I didn't worry about that stuff. And then I went to a secondary school, really hard, tough, rough secondary school, and the emphasis on not being gay, like that being like the fundamental thing that would be the worst thing ever, was like such a jarring. And then I remember really trying to be this concept of being a man, cutting my hair short, wearing Ben Sherman shirts, like just the way you talk about women and losing your virginity was the key thing over anything else. And then some of that programming, having to try and undo a lot of it as my life's gone on, is still a struggle. And I think and I've been blessed to, I think, have powerful women in my life, and also had that period where I could be more fluid with what I was doing, and then I have mates from school who I just think are like, well, I'm, boys will be boys. I'm on WhatsApp groups with groups of lads that you're just like, nothing's changed, and part of them seem happy in that tribal aspect, I guess, to being this kind of lad, man, boys together, look at tits, I've never watched football or engaged in any of those things. So I think it's a struggle for some people to really challenge themselves on that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's obviously, I can only kind of talk about it from the perspective of, I see what toxic masculinity does to society and to women, but then to men, what would you say to someone that thinks it's not a thing? Because I see that a lot I try not to have too many of those conversations or say it, because I feel like a lot of people, when they're entering those conversations, we're in confirmation bias territory already. There's nothing that's going to change if somebody's already turned up, like kind of with their just right ready to fight. But what would you say to someone that says like, this is not a thing, this is rubbish?
It's really interesting. We talk about this in a lot of things that are happening in the world now, and everyone talking about the polarization or people being attacked or people. And again, I'm in a position, I think, to what I've always tried to do, even with my work, is try and sneak opinions or thoughts into people's heads, because I think you're right. When you come, if I've got a group of mates or I'm with people, I've been with mates who've said homophobic things or said that, misogynistic things. And for me, it's more about trying to unpack it slyly than maybe trying to challenge them massively on toxic masculinity, which they can just turn their back on really quickly. And and as a man, as a white passing man, it's easier for me, I think, to sneak ideas in sometimes. But it is a difficult one, because if I'm honest, there are times of me when I'm out with certain groups of mates and I just let the stuff slide because I can't. I think there's groups of mates where they'll also see me and they'll be like, oh, Gabe, he's the artsy liberal one, and I think the most important thing I can say between men and also talking about the mental health issues of this is trying to talk and connect with for me, it's connecting with your male friends and getting them to open up and finding out what's going on. And as life's gone on, I've found actually some people who gave off this facade of a certain thing, they've softened, and then you can actually have a meaningful conversation with them. And I don't know, I just think, it's tricky to, as you said, if someone's like, I don't believe in toxic masculinity, it's very tricky to convince them in that exchange that it exists. Say for you, that might be a more antagonistic conversation. As a woman, because men, whereas maybe I can do some years' work on someone. But I think it's I don't know what I'd say. I try and explain it. I just try and explain that it's not about men being toxic. It's about these images and ideas we've been fed for years and years that have created this but that's what I'm saying. But part of me would also be like, well, I'd say to them, well, would you cry in front of your loved ones? Would you feel comfortable with that? And then if they're like, well, no, then I would be like, well, why not? And try and sort of get them through that way, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of my, I think there's a middle ground between it where I think, you know, a lot of my mates do cry, but then at the same time, yeah, it's a complicated one because also some people just seem happy with the structures that exist between men and women in the world, and that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole other hideous part of it. That exactly that people remind me of every day online. So I remember when I think I reposted an article, and then one of my cousins, like on my story, one of my cousins was like, so what do you think this means? And I was like, I already know what you're asking. I can hear your tone of voice in this message, Anton. I'm not telling you. Go away. So because I think as well, there's like if I feel like there's another level of toxic masculinity that exists in the Black community that's really specific as well. And then or maybe, I don't know, I'm not saying another level like it's worse. I just think it's just like there's its own little subsection within it that exists sometimes.
I think that's interesting, and as a white passing person, I can't go too fully into it, but one thing I will say is I've thought about I have a multicultural family. I think every culture or race has its own version of it, and I don't really know which is, because I see it in upper class friends who went to boarding school and were tortured in their dorms in boarding school versus working class friends who got in fights on, you know, street corners, and then the Jamaican side of my family where there is, you know, you raised up, you know, getting licks on with your belt versus this. I don't know which one's worse. I feel like it exists in many different forms.
It's like their own little kind of subcategories, aren't they, within it? It's
and I don't know which because I don't think you can say which one is more more damaging in the long term, because weirdly on the Jamaican side of my family there was a more openness to talk about what happened, and when on the white side of my family there's a repression that I feel like almost causing more damage because nobody talks about anything that happened in their childhood or anything.
It's a real mixture, isn't it? Because then my family is like, again, multicultural Italian, which and a completely different type of toxic masculinity that exists in that. Then Jamaican, it's like a different toxic masculinity, and then my, you know, like then there's English side of my family, so it's like I see that it's like from repression to screaming in the street. It's like covers the entire scale of kind of expression. But then also just like it's always really interesting, I think, where women fall in these structures, because I would say in my Jamaican family it's a really maternal, so like the women are all powerful in my family, even it's like all the guys have done well, but you have not done as well as us, end of story. But then there's still things within it where they still really think that women, every now and again, they don't say it too loudly to us, I'm not gonna lie, but you might overhear them saying it to their friends. They're not too scared when we're around, but they do still really believe and adhere to these like really specific things of masculinity and femininity, and it's just really interesting.
The men or the women?
The men do.
Do the women adhere to, like, because I know this is one of the complicated things that I think people get caught up on about roles and roles people are supposed to, and that like, oh well, you can't be a mother and cook, you know, like there's different. It's about, I think people get confused about the difference between toxic masculinity versus roles between men and women roles. Or relationships. And I was just interested, the women in your family still see, would they think, oh, men should provide? Or basically one of the weird things I have, and this is across the board, where like, I feel like if I go on a date, friends always have that I should pay for everything on that date. That first date. Like, it's just been ingrained in me. I don't know why. And I spoke to female friends and they're like, that's insane. But then all of them has also said, but it would also kind of be nice when you go on a date if the man did pay. These are very heteronormative versions. But so there's also just those things of what people...
Those kind of,
expect.
That is really interesting. Sorry, carry on.
And I wonder... No, but and this is a generalization, but when, you know, I see my family in Jamaica, the first thing that struck me about Jamaica was I was shocked at how powerful the women were in Jamaica. Like I'd always thought Jamaicans, and they do have these kind of more traditional outlooks for male and female roles, and there's a lot of homophobia in that country. But I was like, wow, the women run Jamaica. But then there was still this kind of adherence to men are supposed to be men, and it was an interesting dynamic, I thought, that challenged it a bit.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder whether those what do those roles play in that?
That's really interesting. It's kind of like, where do gender roles meet or intersect with toxic masculinity and kind of that kind of toxicity? And I think, I don't know, my family is definitely, in some parts of it, people do really believe really specifically in gender roles. Even, for example, my mum, even while being powerful, still believes in really specific things. And honestly, I challenge her on a daily basis just to annoy her about it. Because I'm like, why do you think that? That's so stupid, Mum. But she genuinely does believe it. But at the same time, it's really powerful. And I would definitely say way more powerful at times than any of, like, my dad or my stepdad. At times, it's really specific. But then I think sometimes where that toxic masculinity intersects is when, I think just in my family alone, maybe I think the women are way more open than the men are. And there's lots of kind of keeping it inside, and then, things then boiling over and sometimes some of their toxic traits and how that affects some of the men's relationships with their partners is definitely something that I've seen play out so many times.
Yeah. And I was reading a thing that's saying that toxic masculinity has nothing to do with like a man wanting to provide or wanting to look after his family. That can just be a healthy choice and all of that, and that it's much more to do with expression, and because I think all of these things, if you're in a relationship where if you're in a relationship where someone does something more than the other, it's not so much about the actions as much as the interactions that you have as people, right? I guess, and because nothing is as simple as that, and I think that's a big one, that communication and being open and honest with each other is really hard, and is getting harder probably with even in Corona times, because I do think you have to sit in rooms with people and just chill out to really get conversations going, and that's happening less and less and less between. Yeah,
definitely. I think our communication skills are really going to be so disrupted and so damaged after this. I think it's going to be a weird one, and I wonder how men and women will interact. Like, just talking about dating, just going on dates has been really interesting. Just seeing people again, first of all, it's just been like, as a person in real life. So
wait, have you've been going on dates?
Yeah. So I've genuinely been going on dates. It's been interesting.
Well, everyone I know has been going, I need to find a lockdown partner before lockdown 2. Yeah. Like really settling for like terrible people, being like,
oh my God. Yeah.
Being like, it doesn't matter, they're a bit annoying, but I can't go into this. And 2, that going for walks, lots of people doing like walks with people, which is kind of, I feel like kind of healthier maybe than getting smashed.
Yeah.
And seeing what happens.
I know, just move in. Hi, I've just met you on the first date. Do you want to just move in now? Just in case of lockdown 2. I think, there's definitely parts of it that kind of go into maybe like more old school, feels like a bit old school courting. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a socially distanced walk. And then maybe I'll let you see my ankle.
Sense and like sensibility, sort of.
Exactly. That kind of thing. Yeah. It's like, I expect sonnets to be read to me on the next date, or I'm going to kick off.
But then you can see their entire life on social media, so it's like this double like sense and sensibility versus knowing everything about them before you go on that walk. We live in strange times.
We really do. What is even happening anymore? I don't even know what's on brand for this year or what's going to happen next. It's so weird. But do you see, like, with toxic masculinity, do you see how, actually, can you give an example? Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Of something that is something that's toxic, that's kind of played out in 2020, so that people can kind of understand the concept.
I mean, do you mean small? I mean, large scale is Donald Trump. Is toxic masculinity. Ugh. He's like. He just got COVID, and his plan was to come out of the hospital with a Superman t-shirt underneath his thing and pull it open to be like, it didn't make me sick. And I was reading, his whole thing is he finds his father had told him that illness is a weakness. Anyone who gets ill is weak. And so the reason he's hated COVID and when he got COVID is he has been he's probably was raised in, I'm not excusing him, but in a toxic masculinity personified.
Yeah.
And he calls people weak. He calls Joe Biden basically a pussy for wearing a mask. He's like, he's always wearing a mask.
Yeah, makes fun of him for being nice to his own son.
Yes, yeah. He cares about his son.
Yeah.
Like, he's toxic masculinity in a person, and his whole thing is don't be weak. And if you haven't succeeded like him, even though he's tanked about 20 businesses, then you aren't good enough. And that plays through America a lot in a big way. Of the American dream is based on, if you work hard enough, you will get it, implying that if you haven't got it, you haven't worked hard enough. When we all know Donald Trump inherited, luck is a huge player in that.
Yeah.
So that for me is a big, one of the big toxic masculinity things. I think, I can't really think, 2020 is so mad. I'm trying to remember back to...
what kind of things? There's like so many things that have happened this year. Really did put you on the spot.
No, but like for me personally, there hasn't... I weirdly in that, and I think it's partly because of the relationship I'm in and where I'm in as a human being, that I feel like I've really let go of a lot of some of that stuff, but as I said, it's been a long process of decoding and questioning, and weirdly talking back to one of the big changes in my life. I used to have a really bad sort of temper and think it was fine to have a temper and fine to like get angry and get in fights or get roused with people or with other blokes, and that was just what being a man was. And then the first time I went to Jamaica to meet my granddad properly in Jamaica. He lived in downtown Kingston, and he had this temper, and I saw it, and it was exactly the same as my temper. And I just went, oh, that's not mine. I don't know why, it was such a weird moment. I went, that's not even my choice. That's something that's coming down from him. And from that day, I really started rethinking my... there was something about bad behavior and thinking that it was okay because that's what we're supposed to do, as opposed to questioning that kind of thing. But yeah, sorry, that was a tangent away from what's the 2020. But yeah, I'd say everything that's going on in America, and to a degree here with male leaders, feels toxic.
Yeah.
Literally.
Like in every single form.
Yeah, and there was some, what happened, didn't someone say, I don't like your tone in the Houses of Parliament? They said it to a male, I think it was Matt Hancock, said it to, I think someone in Labour. She was questioning him, and he was like, I don't like your tone, can you bring down your tone? And everyone was like, whoa, dude, like, you don't say that to... So yeah, politics for me is the top, if you were going to say 20 has been full of it. Yeah.
Definitely, with Donald Trump being the poster child.
Oh, it was Matt Hancock to Rosanna Alin Khan. He didn't like our tone. Yeah, but that's where it's, I think, and that's been filtering through a lot, especially in America, I think. Yeah,
definitely. And what do you think upholds toxic masculinity these days? Because we know before it was, obviously, it's that we still live in a patriarchal society. We're not going to be out of that anytime soon.
Nope.
So we know that that's one of the things that definitely kind of upholds it. But what other things do you think contribute to upholding this kind of toxic masculinity now?
I was thinking about this because, we talk about the media a lot, but I feel like it's weird because I feel like I was thinking when I grow up, what was the shows I was watching, and who were the men? And I was thinking, well, I watched a lot of Friends, and weirdly, I don't know, someone will probably correct me on this, I haven't seen it, but I didn't feel that they were necessarily toxic masculinity. I didn't think Ross was, but I suppose maybe his pursuit of, I don't know, but they felt kind of sensitive. And then I also, was a huge Fresh Prince of Bel-Air fan, and Will Smith always seemed, I don't know, I didn't feel that there was this kind of Will Smith was crying in Fresh Prince, and the men were friends with girls, and they seemed, but then of course then you had shows like 24 and actions, and I think action stars and all that. So, but I think the media in general is in terms of what you watch on Netflix or what you watch on BBC, there seems to be a greater sensitivity to the stuff being made and the characters we're seeing. So I don't know if it's all in the art realm as much before, as much as I feel like it is really in politics. I do feel like when you'll watch something, I'll watch something on Netflix and be like, oh wow, what a wonderful worldview that show has, and then you'll just turn on the news and it's like this like Boris Johnson's not seeing his children, but no one seems to mind about that, and then he's aggressively like
Can we talk about how many children this man has? And he's blatantly got other secret children. Those little children of the corn, they're not the only ones that he has. Just no.
But also, like, his affairs, and the other woman he had the affair with, that he gave all that money to, and now she came out and said it. I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert on toxic masculinity. I don't know if these things completely tie into it, but there definitely seems to be in British politics and American politics a very strong men being men. And get on board with it. This is, I'll go back to Donald Trump, but he's like, I don't pay taxes. This is the deal. This is all of it is about this traditional idea of what a successful man is. Yeah. And I think that's holding it up a lot. And then I think social media is doing a huge amount to as you say, someone posts a post, someone else feels attacked and comes back on, and this whole dialogue, I'm like, if you sat in a room with this person, you could talk about it, but it's really headlines and stuff are making people feel attacked, I think. Yeah,
definitely. I think, you brought up the media there, and I think obviously the media is still so patriarchal, and there's still so much nonsense that filters down from it. And I mean, literally, I don't even like to talk about the Daily Mail, but I'm bringing it up anyway. And every woman is putting on a display, but every man is just standing. Every man is just there. He's just existing. But if I was sitting here, I'm putting on a busty display by sitting here because I got tits. Like that kind of shit.
I was trying. The amount of times nearly spills out of, or they always use the terms pop. Has a wardrobe malfunction, and I always think there's the hilarious poster. I think of it's like an Adam Sandler movie, and it's the premiere, and it's Adam Sandler and Kevin James and Selena Gomez, and Adam Sandler and Kevin James are in t-shirts and shorts, and Selena Gomez is like fully dressed up, and they're just like, this is how these overweight men can turn up to their premiere, and the one woman in the film is like glitz to the nines and has to look a certain way. But yeah, I think it does feel like we were sort of going somewhere. I mean, people say this all the time, and maybe we weren't, but we were sort of getting somewhere with this, and then the dialogue around it has become polarized again. And people are...
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like, how do we now start to get over that polarization? Is it that we just, if we bring it up again, I am not bringing it up to anyone. I'm bringing it up on the podcast. Please don't at me. But then when we talk about it, we talk about toxic masculinity, how do we start to bridge the gap? Is it that we need to just explain it a different way? Does it need a new title, maybe?
Yeah, it is frustrating, like you said, about someone saying, not saying white privilege, but saying, and I was just like, yeah, but give that phrase a month, and someone will
be upset about it.
They will be upset about it, and changing. And language does have to change. I do think that's what, I'm not someone who's against that. I think people take issue with that. And I'm like, well, language does have to change because we're changing, and, it does keep having to sort of morph and change as the times do. But I guess, but I'm also reluctant. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, it's toxic masculinity. It's not. It's so clear what it was about to me. I think I think talk about it differently. I think, for me personally, it's about trying to engage and have those conversations with people. And I do see some change in men around me. But yeah, I don't know how on a wider scale. I don't know if we're talking about a social media discourse. I just don't know how you navigate that.
No, blow it all up and start again.
Yeah, just delete the internet and then
hit refresh.
Yeah. Because like you said, when you posted that article and then someone came back, it's like, I just don't know. Like, people are angry, and their anger is going in different directions right now, and it's been channeled into different stuff. So it's just so hard to know whether you're engaging someone on the actual issue, or whether you're engaging with them about how pissed off they are about something else.
Yeah, exactly. I think that sometimes when there's actually, do you know what? Something just popped into my head that, so I do boxing and stuff. And when I go to a boxing gym, it's run by boxers. So we're already in this hyper masculine kind of like atmosphere. And there's some things you may get into conversations about, but apart from that, I am here to box. I'm not here for anything else. I do not care about your life. So there's definitely that kind of just, let's talk about exercise and things we ate today. But then sometimes online I'll engage with the guy that owns the gym, and like, he's a really nice dude and we get on. But my God, I would never, ever, ever, ever say toxic masculinity to him. He would lose his shit because he once posted, I would say that he definitely falls into someone that maybe not entirely toxic masculinity has done stuff to him, but there's definitely some resides within him, but he doesn't really know the concept or understand it. And I wouldn't be able to explain it to him clearly either. And I couldn't, because I'm a woman and he wouldn't listen to me. So because he genuinely doesn't listen to women. But I remember we were having a conversation about something, and he posted something on his stories, and he asked a question, and it was literally something to do with relationships. And I said, oh, but then sometimes this isn't always the case. And I just gave him a scenario that I've been through and said, you know, X, Y, and Z. And he was like, why did you send me that? And I was like, because I was responding directly to your thing. And I think he'd forgotten he'd posted it the day before. And then I said, then he posted something else, the next one, talking about the difference between men and women. And I said, well, you know, sometimes people just do X, Y, and Z. And he got really angry that I said people, because he was like, no, I think it's women. I don't think it's meant to. And I was like, well, I'll just say people, because genuinely people behave in different ways. And I said, if we keep categorizing that women make wild decisions, and because they really want men to love them, so they're just doing all these silly things and they're just letting men take advantage of them, then I said, if you say that, that's so silly, because then it means that if a man has ever felt like that, he's not going to ever tell you if it's one of your friends, or you're going to make men think they couldn't ever be vulnerable or in that situation. And he was like, no, it's women. He goes, I know you're just a nice person. You just say people because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I was like, no, I'm saying it because genuinely people can be all of these things. And I think we need to I realize I'm never going to have that conversation with him again, because it genuinely, I'm saying it in, I'm really kind of making it very small and minimizing how long that went on for and how tedious it was. But he believes what he believes. But was
it upsetting to you?
It wasn't upsetting to me. The only thing that and he's a lovely man. The only thing that upsets me when I kind of don't have these conversations with him, because he so staunchly believes in what he believes in. And it's weird. It's like you made a really good point. That's what made me think of it. Sometimes people are annoyed about other things, but then it just attached to this. So when I've had conversations with him, which I try to minimize and not really do very often outside of fitness, it actually turns out there's something else that he's annoyed at, but he can't quite identify it. And actually in the arguing about it or in the discussion, he then gets to the nugget of the problem kind of thing.
But that's what I mean. It's like so much with the Black Lives Matter thing and hearing people like White Lives Matter. There was some people like working class mates where you could just tell they were pissed off, and then it was like, well, my life's shit, and it was like, it's like so many people are coming from that perspective on when any discussions sort of happening, that it is sometimes difficult to have a nuanced conversation about like, and what he's talking about, probably toxic masculinity is causing potentially what issues he's having.
Yeah.
But he's not putting he's just thinking, well, why, when I go on, I'm just paraphrasing, this isn't what he was probably talking about, but I was like, why am I going on dates with women and they're ending like this every time? It's something to do with women. When really, if you might trace it back, it might be to do with what you're bringing
you're bringing to the table
for the first place, and what you're expecting of women, which is what comes. Weirdly, I don't know if this is useful or not, but I was reading up something just before that there was a new psychological study on that they'd done for years. Psychology and therapy and all the study cases have been white heterosexual men. And then once they started broadening that out and started studying women, what they discovered was useful to the men, because just studying men on psychology isn't necessarily useful for men, because it's a very narrow field. So once they studied women, and that's what I kind of feel, that it feels like you're being penned in, but really it's opening it up for you to see, like as you said, that our emotions are linked, and it's not just men feel this, women feel this, because then, as you say, if you feel something that women, quote unquote, are supposed to feel, what's wrong with you? When if you're like, which is essentially like crying, for instance, but then if you realize, oh, we all cry, it's a much more freeing human existence.
Yeah.
But if whatever existence he's pushing, when women do this, men do that, I think that's really damaging for yourself. I just think you're really cutting yourself off from experiencing any emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was just like, my goodness, because then I know he was particularly hurt in a previous relationship, and I was like, I wonder if that's where it comes from. Something really specific has happened.
I do think that's a really interesting point, because how much I've been lucky to have quite a few relationships and learn about my own behavior, and then also if you have one long relationship and then break up, you learn a lot potentially about the opposite sex in your mind from that relationship, and then your feelings afterwards. And I think that can colour quite a lot how you move forward and how you think people are, which it is with everyone. You know, our encounters with other people, we can put a lot on those and make them kind of add up to our worldview.
Yeah.
And I would have probably at 15, when I was dumped, but I might have had a year of like, oh, women are the worst, you know, all of them.
Every single one.
Is a snake.
Yeah.
And then and I still remember, I've got a lot of female friends now, but I still remember at school, it was sort of conditioned. Women were for trying to make out with or have sex with. Like, that was like kind of what you were supposed to think. And I remember when I started having female friends when there was none of that, and being like, wow, there was a part of me for ages that did see women as another thing outside of being a man, and not like as just another human on the planet.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because I definitely think that there is that point. I think I remember when I was younger, there was a point where I was like, I've always hung around with lots of guys, just because so many of my cousins born in the same year as me or around the same time. It's me, Charlotte, Sarah, and everyone else is a guy in our family for 2 years above and like 2 years below. So we hung around with them all the time and their friends. And there was that point where you almost see the crossover in their eyes. You see the crossover in their eyes from when it's like, oh my God, you're a human. There is depth. You're not just tits. You're not just tits.
But there's a crossover, isn't there? There's the childhood bit where it's all fine. And then I watched this SNL sketch. It wasn't a very good sketch, but it was about Harry Potter, and it was an old sketch, and Lindsay Lohan was playing Hermione, and they'd come back from summer, and Hermione basically looked like Lindsay Lohan now. So Ron and Harry were like, like couldn't like become teenage boys. But I was like, there's like the stage before that, you're friends. Then there's the weird sex stage where no one knows what's going on, and then then there's the stage where you sort of come out of that fog. I don't know what, I think it's different now, because I think there's studies saying, you know, teens aren't having sex as much, but I don't know what pornography or online stuff is doing to that. I mean, if you talk about what's toxic now, the access to pornography, which I didn't have, is mind-boggling. And Instagram, you know, just so many bikini photos and six packs on Instagram. Like, we just weren't looking. As I said, I was looking at like Chandler Bing. Yeah. Like, who's not I do think that stuff is way worse than it ever was.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's like a real thing, isn't it? It's like there's that meme when I was 14, it's like a potato, and then kids now when they're 14 look like bloody supermodels. Because like truly, if I look, but like my youngest, to be fair, my sisters are kind of aged out of that. They just kind of were on the edge of before that started changing. When I look at some of my cousins, and I look at my cousins, like my cousin Lauren, she's so stunning. But I was like, when I was your age, I truly look like shit. But I didn't care. But I definitely would never put my picture next to hers now. My God, the contrast is like, it kills me to even think about it. But
that's so true. Like, you just weren't taking that many photos of yourself. Yeah. Like, you weren't even close. I did, and I don't even think I looked as bad as I realised I've looked now. When I look at the photos and I look at my middle parting, my curtains, I'm like,
What the fuck was I doing?
And maybe I would have avoided that if I'd had an Instagram account because everyone would have told me how terrible I look. But equally, you just weren't putting your image out to the world that much. And so, of course, it's more damaging now.
To bring it back to our toxic masculinity, our favourite subject, I think because we talked about it like a fair amount over like the past like 30 minutes or so. And I think we've kind of we've touched on things that would be about gender roles and gender stereotypes and kind of crossed over into what is toxic masculinity. Could you categorize or like identify some clear examples of what toxic masculinity is? So that, because I think that if people listen, some people will be like, well, what falls into which category? So yeah, can we give some examples?
I think it's a difficult one to give specific. It's the example for me. It's the idea of being a man, which is a very obtuse big question. But the idea of not showing your emotions, of being tough, and I do wonder how much homophobia or not being gay or not being confused about your feelings towards to other men or just other, like, I think it's like you're supposed to, as I took it from school, you're supposed to want to get with women, maybe more women than one, and you know, and treat women right, but still at the same time, like, not show weakness. I think it's a huge one. So not fail, and not be a failure, and be a success. And that if you are not a success, you are not a man. I think that's a really big damaging one, actually, that this idea that you haven't done enough, or you have to fit into a certain I mean, I've spent a huge time of my this was an interesting one. Lots of my relationships, I have not been the financial breadwinner in them. Nearly every woman I've been out with has been very much more wealthy and successful to me. And that ate away at me at certain points. And I was working hard. I just wasn't getting my career off the ground. But I did feel like I wasn't a man. And I did feel embarrassed in some sense. And there was a part of me that couldn't. And now I'm in the first relationship in my life where I can provide financially, and I do feel better about myself. Now, I think there's a combination. I think everyone feels good when they're earning, you know, regardless of where you're from. But there was a real thing in my mind about I'm not being a man. And I have friends who are staying at home with the kids while their other halves are making their money, and they say the same thing. They're like, there's part of me, I can't deny it, even though I love being at home with my kid, where I feel sort of like I'm not a man. And I think it's stuff like I'm fighting, the idea of fighting. I remember, especially at school, not letting now I walk away from sometimes I've walked away to a fight, you know, where people have even been like, come on mate, you probably should have fought them. And I'm like, I don't, because once the bus I get, someone got stabbed because someone threw chips at them, and they said stop throwing chips at me, and then they got stabbed. Okay. So I was just like, I'm not doing that. And also, I got beaten up all the time. I got mugged all the time as a kid. So I walk away from a fight, but not walking away from a fight or standing up or that kind of violence. Again, you're a coward, you're a pussy. That type of stuff is just not... That's part of it, I think. Yeah. But that's stuff that there's parts of me that suffer from. Yeah. And still tackling. But yeah, I think
those would be really good examples. I think because that's one of the things I think when people are talking about it is tangible examples to be able to explain the concept to them actually really helps. Because I think that's the thing with when things are not concepts, things are concepts essentially. They're so hard to explain, but if you can have examples, it's good.
I would say if I was trying to think about it for myself, what I've tried to do is I constantly question what is my opinion and my genuine reaction to a situation or a person, and what has been taught, and what I think I'm supposed to do or think I'm supposed to react. And that's my biggest one of like, I've been out. My girlfriend works. She's studying, but she also works she's the barmaid in my local pub, and she works. You know, she gets tips and stuff. And sometimes when she goes out dressed to work, she's dressed in a way that I'm like, okay, but I'm confident in our relationship. And she had a boyfriend before who used to go and sit down and sit at the bar and watch. And he said she just sit at the bar and watch, and like not, you know, no flirting, no. And I would have been like that about maybe even 5 years ago. I think I would have been like that. And now, one, because I trust her so much, and she's fucking tough, as way harder than me.
Yeah.
That type of thinking. But then I talk to people about this as well. It's a huge thing about insecurity, about male insecurity and feeling threatened, and those things really. I actually think that's a huge part of toxic masculinity. It's all a lot of it fed. You know, the patriarchy is almost built on male insecurity, right? It's like
and protecting it at all costs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's almost why I've always thought that like why this idea that men always want to have sex all the time and women don't, I think was more a way to keep women down, because men are so scared of the female sexual appetite, because then we have to know what we're doing or start understanding that it's better to be like, no, you don't want it. Yeah. I think it's all born of insecurity, and so that would be my thing. As I always question if I'm jealous. What I try and do now, especially with my girlfriend, is I open with, look, I'm jealous. I'm saying that first, rather than usually going, why are you speaking to Kevin? He's a fucking prick. I'll be like, I'm jealous of Kevin. I'm going to admit it. I'm not going to be afraid, so you can see my insecurity. Yeah. I know it's stupid, but I've just got to say it. So try and call out my insecurity straight away. Yeah. And do that. I think can help you focus in a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you were saying about what it is that you think you should be thinking and what it is you actually feel, and really having letting those two things kind of work and have a conversation with yourself about it. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and it can be exhausting, don't get me wrong, because no one knows the answer, but there is definitely something in when I'm like, I want to fight this guy for besmirching my name, and then thinking, but do I? And does he matter? Yeah. Do I like?
Yeah, there's a few things I took from there. One, what that on earth happened at your school? Your school sounds wild. I'm slightly frightened of it. Two, I cannot believe that somebody sat down and truly watched your girlfriend at a bar. I can't believe that's the relationship she came out of. I am so glad that she's not in that anymore. That's insane. And also what you were saying about the jealousy thing, I think that's really good. That's actually quite a healthy thing, I think, to do for definitely for different genders. But I think that kind of identifying it and saying, this is how I feel, and so it's just out there, let's kind of talk about it. And
what? Yeah. But yeah, I think so much in life, this might be a kind of a hippy-dippy thing to say, and I might be wrong, but so much in life, I think, is us wanting to be loved and fear of people not loving us, right? And so the reason I jumped into my gender norms or toxic masculinity is I thought, well, this is what will make people like me and love me. And anything outside of that is a risk. And it's like a desperate... And where your level of that comes from and how you were raised, I came from many broken homes, so people leaving felt like a real possibility constantly. So loads of my relationships, I had to convince myself, this person's not going to leave me, chill the fuck out and stop trying to control them or be jealous. And so much of that toxic masculinity also comes from that. But then there's a huge side of it that I do think is important, which is around it, but which is about the mental health and men committing suicide and I think that stuff, we're talking about lots of stuff, but there's a lot going on in there that isn't just toxic masculinity based. I think that's like a deeper psychological aspect of it that I think toxic masculinity is a huge part of it, but it's not. I don't know how deep,
Yeah, you don't know if it's kind of the direct kind of cause necessarily, but there are definitely mental health repercussions from all of these different things that we talked about. And especially if we kind of take it back right to the top of it, where I was like, boys don't cry. If you just when I've had any conversations with anyone about toxic masculinity, the one example I give, I'm like, boys don't cry. So let's discuss that, because then actually What would happen if they were allowed to? What would happen if they were allowed to feel their feelings? What happened if they were socialized to be able to talk in the way that women? I can go into a toilet, have a conversation with someone about anything that I'm feeling, come out and feel better. I've just been therapized by my fellow women in a toilet, obviously not now in COVID times, but I've been able to get it out of me and then think about, okay, what do I do about that? I'm kind of problem solve or have someone else either just listen to me. If men can't do that, where does that all go?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate, I think, in a lot of the men I'm surrounded by, and I work in the arts as well, so that's a different ball. You know, you go and train for 3 years how to cry as a man when you do drama. Like that's all they're doing with you. But I have a whole group of friends who aren't anything to do with that. And yeah, I would say actually I've never seen any of them cry. To be honest. But weirdly, during COVID, I've connected to a lot of them a lot more over FaceTime, and there's been a lot more opening up and vulnerability, because I think people's suddenly their worldview has changed, and the idea of success and for anyone now is a kind of tangible, like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think and if I'm honest with myself, I still don't like the idea of me crying. I'll cry in front of my girlfriend. We watched the Disney film yesterday and I cried. But in front of my male friends, no, I wouldn't. I don't know why. Yeah. I just think that's just a condition. That's what I mean. That's the conditioning of, in terms of men opening up to each other. I do think, yeah, it's, but can I ask you though, you have male friends though, right?
Yeah. Do
you find that they open up to you?
Yeah, a lot of my female friends, we say that our male friends open up to us, never in a group. It's kind of one-to-one, whereas women we could sit in a group and talk about our vaginas. We don't give a shit. There are no boundaries. But then with men, it'll be one-to-one. It'll be like sending you a message. They'll tentatively get to that point at some point. They will kind of work their way into them. So you still love that.
No. Yeah. I'm just thinking how actually you've hit the nail on the head. I've never sat around with a group of guys and talked about our penises.
Yeah, and it's like, why? You all have them.
Why not? That would be so freeing.
It's still things we talk about all the time. That's why there's no boundaries. But yeah, men have definitely started opening up to me more and more. But then I've always had men use women a lot as free therapy. So there has to be a line where sometimes I'm like, it's great and I'm so glad you're opening up, but there are some things I can't necessarily problem solve or help you with, because I don't understand everything about it. I can just give you my worldview over here, not necessarily that's completely aligned with maybe what they need. So I definitely encourage my male friends when they open up to me to open up to each other, or open up to one other person, because I was like, there is someone going through this. You're not doing this by yourself, because they do actually say, I haven't really told anyone else about this. And I'm like, why?
Do you know what? There is a big one that you've said there as well, which I do talk to certain friends about now, but I feel like there's a big thing about sex, and we're talking very much about sort of heteronormative concepts here, I think, but men from an early age are supposed to know how to do sex, right? Like you're just supposed to like go in and be amazing and get out, and that's the air we were all giving off for years. And then it wasn't till quite late into my life that I would start asking, be like, what do you actually like? Do you like? And you'd be like, oh my god,
are you enjoying this?
It's completely, because we're so feared of being shit at it. And a big thing that I wouldn't, you'd have men go, yeah, we banged all night, but you wouldn't be like, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. And do you feel like, you very rarely would sit and have an honest, open conversation about your insecurities, but which I have done more with nowadays with more male friends, but I would always more with female friends. But yeah, that just even talking about those things are real blocks for men, because we're embarrassed of being not good or admitting that we have flaws, I guess.
Yeah.
In any situation. And what you said about the penises, I just remember being so worried about penis size at school, so worried. And imagine if you'd sit around and just sort of go, oh, this is like, I just think that would be so, just a different ball game.
Yeah. I suppose that'd be so different for men because there's a whole societal additional thing about penis size, whereas with women it's like the size of my vagine means nothing. Like
but you've got still there's a lot. There's still a lot.
Just, and we can all see boobs, so I suppose it's a bit different. Yeah.
But still, if you look at all, especially now, men looking at pornography and the vaginas that men are looking at, and I was watching for my sins Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop series on Netflix, which
Amazing.
I don't know, and she does one on vaginas, and they show the whole point of the episodes. They show lots of different vaginas.
Yeah.
And even as a man, I was like, wow, men don't know about. Yeah. It took me a while to know that vaginas were different. You just think there's like one vagina, and that's and then like you see it and you're like, this isn't, and I think just those kinds of things all feed into this idea that women are one way, men are another way. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, you're fucking weird. Yeah. And that we're actually really the same. And actually those dynamics are usually completely the opposite way around, I've found. The women are way tougher and then the men are bawling their eyes out.
Yeah, and I think it's that internalizing everything. That's, it's like, where does that go? It's like, I just thinking about, you're talking about men talking groups. I'd only say one of my friends, Alex, he's been one of my best friends since I was about 8 years old. And the reason why we get on so well is because he is such an open man. And then and the guys that are around him, his friends do confide in him and do talk to him, and he does make them talk as groups. He's one of the only guys I know that kind of outside of the arts world, let's say, that, and even then he's kind of in that, but he's the only one I would say that really has those kind of open conversations. And he when he talks to me, it's not necessarily confiding, he just talks to me about everything because he will not keep a single thing to himself. It's like he's just an open book. And then so therefore he's attracted other guys, and over time they now have a really strong bond with him and open up to him. But we were talking about the fact that more men need to have these kind of open conversations and not be so afraid of it. But how do we facilitate that? How do we kind of get people to that place?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. The one thing I will say that I've seen in groups of guys, regardless though, that I've been it, and when you said that though, is there is a love. You do see men with a real love for each other, but it's not expressed, and I've seen that so much, but yeah, how do you get those conversations? Again, this is a really pessimistic. I shouldn't even say, but in the current climate, getting meaningful. I've been thinking about it all the time because I think about it a lot because of my work and like talking about white privilege in particular. I've been following Lawrence Fox, and like watching his. When you're like screaming at Twitter, you're like screaming, but I'm like, I keep thinking like, how would you sit down with him and get him to fucking realize, like, does he know, like, and I just keep like daydreaming almost, like, what is the conversation that and it's because I feel like if you go to someone like that angrily, that's what he wants. Yeah. And I'm in a perfect position again as a white person to sort of like go in and be like, hey, but do you not realize this is, but like, and so but then you just look at it all and I'm like constantly thinking, how do you in this current climate, if you could sit down and get people in a room, I think you could get the discussion going. I genuinely believe it. I believe if you sat with a group of guys and really got discussion going, I think you could do it. But that's a small pool. To broaden that out, I don't know. And as you said, I think it goes to the top. I think when you look at Biden and Trump and Boris, God, those are the worst examples of men. And they're in charge. So how can you tell the country to change until we also change those people that, both Biden and Trump have been accused of sexual assault. Yeah. Trump multiple times. How could you not find two people to run the biggest country and not be like?
Can we have anyone that hasn't assaulted anyone? Like, is there no one else in that pool, or is it that these two have assaulted the least people? I don't know what. Well, I don't know where the fucking bar is. Yeah, Trump's
assaulted a lot of fucking people.
Right?
So if that's the least,
the bar is so fucking low.
But that's what I mean. That's when those are your people, and we still buy into it. I still, if I was in America, I'd be voting Biden. I just think it's a really difficult thing to shake in people's mind. But I do think, to put a positive, I do think things have changed. And I look at my younger brother, I look at the younger generation. There are more conversations about identity and sexuality that if we're around when I was that age would have been game changing for me potentially, because as I said, when I was growing up, it was just don't be gay. And it wasn't until I, went to grammar school and had gay friends, without gay friends, I'm sure I had gay friends, they just went, that I started to understand that was just like a weird fear-mongering thing.
Yeah.
But now that conversation's moved on so much, I do think there's a change, hopefully. But then I do question with social media and people looking through screens, then what damage pornography and... But yeah, I don't know how you engage online with anyone.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? I think one of the main things that I've learned kind of when talking about like kind of any mental health or anything is that a few years ago I did a story in the Metro talking about a really specific incident. And then when I talked about that, then I already, like my friends already talked to me a lot anyway. I'm solutions driven. So they'll come to me for a solution as opposed to just vent. And people that know me know that, so that's cool. But then when I released that, then I had people who I haven't spoken to maybe since I was about 8 kind of thing. Just that, hi, you're right. Oh, by the way, all these things happened to me. Oh, okay. Have you talked to anyone about it? Well, no. And I was like, I suggest you do. So, but then by being open about it, my own experiences, it fully opened a floodgate of people. And actually, most of them men. Because then women were already talking to each other. I mean, I already know the intricate details of all my friends' vaginas. There's nothing else that I don't know. And everything else they tell me in real, they're literally bloody live blogging and tweeting everything to our friendship groups anyway. But I had like a ton of men open up to me about things. And also in doing this, like the mental health series that's on at the moment, whenever I've posted different subjects, most days I will get a guy who I haven't spoken to for yonks will message and say, do you know, this happened to me? And I'm like, and you've never talked about it? Or, oh, well, it's not really, I'm fine. It was like, when it came to miscarriage, they was like, oh, no, it's fine. I'm fine. I was just more concerned about my partner. I was like, but this also affected you too. Have you processed it? Here's a link. Go and watch this talk and, work through this process as well. So I think maybe certainly men being more really open about things may encourage other men to not keep it in.
I think that's true. I think it's so weird though, isn't it? I think I speak to so many people that we live in it. Because with my when Black Lives Matter was happening, there's this white privilege. Because my mum is mixed race and I'm white, I can talk about white privilege in a really personal way that I think that people do respond to, because I'm just like, look, I grew up my brother is, I grew up in the same house as these people. They are my family, but because I'm white, these things happen. And people are like, oh, I sort of get it when you're coming from a really personal thing, but also the danger of that for you and other people, not for me so much, but other people have had to do that. But then sometimes then the floodgates open and you've been through that. So equally, you could then be triggered by what people are saying. But yeah, the personal way is always really useful and important, because it gives people less of a, you're grounding down on, because that's the thing, when you're grounding down on individuals and experience and people. And I do think people care about people, but it's about trying to get those convos to resonate as opposed to the big internet convo, which is like, again, when I look at Lawrence Fox and he's just the stuff he's saying, I'm just like, you just need to spend like 20 minutes like talking, like not going on like a Jeremy Carwin, but do you know what I mean? It's like just engage with any personal stories with people or experience anything like that, and it does just change things. But yeah, it's a really, men do need to open up, but it's, as I said, it's really difficult because one, we're if not more living in the patriarchal society we were in the past, and two, we have been programmed to, I was going to say programmed to fuck, which is a really weird thing. We've been programmed really strongly to, even I can't shake some of these things. So you really have to dig deep. And some people are just like, they don't want to do the work. Yeah.
Some people are fine, like you said before. Some people are fine the way they are. So, I mean, I suppose
But the problem is they're fine the way they are, but they're fine with the way things are. And that's what's dangerous. And that's what they shouldn't be. Because then you're like, well, people are killing themselves because of the way things are. So, and I think that's when people need to realise that just because you're okay with the way things are, you should maybe challenge it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me. I've loved this chat about toxic masculinity. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to get you on the show again. Where
Pleasure.
can people find you online?
I'm just Google my name, Gabriel Bisset-Smith. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, although I constantly toy with deleting them every single day the 2020 rolls on. But I'm like, no, I'm still here. I also wanted to say a good charity is Calm, CALM, for men's mental health, and they're really great. And I have some friends who work with them. And so if you're listening or experiencing any of these things, just Google them, and they've got loads of things you can ring in and stuff like that to deal with. But I'm just that's basically, I'm just online, Gabriel Bisset-Smith. You can at me all you like.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, for anyone that is listening, there are resources out there. Go on to Instagram as well, and we'll be sharing different things, including the videos from previous talks, and you can see what ones are coming up as well, and keep the conversation going. And I think Gabriel made a really good point there. It's when I did open up about everything, I did have really clear boundaries, and I'd had therapy as well, and that really helped. So if you are going to share anything, any stories, make sure that 1, you are therapied up to the max, and 2, you've set really clear boundaries. And if you don't want the floodgates open, just be really, really clear to say, I'm sharing this, but it doesn't mean I want you to share back. And so then you can set those boundaries for yourself and just be aware of how it makes you feel. But yeah, thank you so much. And I'll see you soon. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Speak On. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, co-workers, strangers in the street. To find out more about us, including our upcoming events, head over to Instagram, instagram.com/speakon_. Bye!